Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with a special edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And the reason why I'm coming at you tonight, and it's not to talk about the matchup between the West Virginia Mountaineers and Cincinnati Bearcats, which will take place on Saturday. And I promise I will bring that preview show to you tomorrow evening. But instead, what I want to talk about is how I'm going to go against the grain, go against what I said. I don't know if I necessarily said I wasn't going to do this, but I've been opposed to doing this since I set kind of the preseason expectations for this West Virginia football team back in about July, and I'm going to move some goalposts. And I hate to do it, and I've waited this long, but since some interesting developments over the course of the last week in the national scene of college football, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to tell you why. So, I think that West Virginia, and it's still going to parlay into my overall goal for this team of winning 8 games, has to win these next 2 games against Cincinnati and Baylor at all costs for head coach Neal Brown to save his job. And why do I say this? And I've had some days to ponder over this thought since that Oklahoma drubbing on Saturday. You know, I take a look at some of the graphics and things posted around social media and seeing that West Virginia, under Neal Brown this season, has beaten teams with a combined record of 27-33. And then you think back on it, this past Saturday against Oklahoma. Did that not kind of feel like one of the old Oklahoma drubbings under head coach Dana Holgorsen? And I know Neal Brown already suffered drubbing to Oklahoma in 2019, and who knows how that 2020 game would have gone. We don't really know because of both teams canceling it over COVID reasons. But we know the game was competitive in 2021, but a letdown. 2022, that West Virginia won on a walk-off field goal. And now we're back to getting blown out by, 39 points to Oklahoma. Penn State, unfortunately, for week 1, covered the spread. West Virginia, maybe most damaging of all, lost to Houston, an opponent that if you look back on this season so far, 10 games in, West Virginia should not have lost to. Neal Brown said himself that game shouldn't have come down to a Hail Mary play anyway, even though, again, and I hate to call it out into one certain play, but if Garrett Green doesn't take off his helmet in the end zone, it doesn't give Houston good enough field position to have even a chance at that Hail Mary play to convert. And we're talking about West Virginia now having a 7-3 record instead of 8-6-4. So might be even staring down a whole different complexion to this season. But regardless, West Virginia lost at the end of the day to Houston. And then, of course, the implosion in the fourth quarter to Oklahoma State, in which Ollie Gordon ran all over them. So you think about the teams that West Virginia's really beaten. And I know this is a pie-in-the-sky, 40,000-foot overview of the season with really no context to it other than what I've just given you so far. And I always say that's dangerous to do. I really think that is dangerous to do when you don't look at each game by game and take the context of that game and how that plays into it. But still, I want to step back because I've had some days to ponder this thought and over. And I think it comes to the overall theme is West Virginia stuck in neutral as a football program? Now, I think that West Virginia's made some incredible strides. I do think for this season. That's where I will give Neal Brown and this staff a lot of credit is. From where this offensive line was in 2019 to today, it's been a complete overhaul, been a rebuild, and it's been on the backs of Doug Nestor, Zach Frazier, Wyatt Milam. And I got to give Tomas Remack, Brandon Yates, Jaquay Hubbard, Nick Malone, got to give them all credit because as an entire group from where this program was in 2019 to today, whole big change. Still, that's 5 years. 5 years of a rebuild to get to this point where you're considered one of the top units in your conference. They finally, I feel have a competent quarterback room. I don't think it's a Will Grier or Geno Smith on this roster, but at least now you're not dealing with a Jared Deggy, Austin Kendall, Jack Allison quarterback room. you have two guys who are Division I, Power 5 caliber players in that room right now. West Virginia as a program has been more competitive in NIL, and I think you're seeing that pay dividends now 2 years into the process, and with Shane Lyons out of the program as athletic director. West Virginia will have an NFL draft pick this year. I think it's going to be Zach Frazier. I think he'll be going pro. He has nothing left to prove at the college level. He deserves to go get paid professionally. He deserves to go try at the give it a shot at the NFL. If Creed Humphrey was a third-round draft pick, I think Zach Frazier has all the right to go and test those waters and go do it. Beanie Bishop very well could be an NFL draft pick this year. I don't know. It'll all kind of depend upon where he tests, but he's put on the tape. He has the statistics to at least warrant consideration to be a draft pick. And who knows? Maybe I think Wyatt Milam has the chops to be an NFL offensive lineman as well, so maybe he gives it a shot and tests the waters. All these players deserve it. I think the other strides, West Virginia beat Pitt. We can't forget that. Even though they're one of the worst teams in Power 5 football this year, West Virginia won the backyard brawl. That's got to mean something. And to get to 8 wins at the end of the day, by the end of the season, that's an accomplishment too. I think there are many programs this year across the country. I know that it's becoming more imbalanced by the day, conferences-wise. But 8 wins is still something that, all the context excluded, 8 wins is something to take a note of. But it goes back to what I said in my Oklahoma State game preview before that game happened, is there's currently, I think, a race for who's going to reign supreme in the new Big 12. Once you add the 4 corner schools to this conference, I said in that preview video, Utah, Oklahoma State, TCU getting to a national championship game, Kansas State, all 4 teams right now, plus some up-and-comers in Arizona who's nationally ranked, UCF who has a top 30 nationally recruiting class, Deion Sanders being at Colorado. There are all of these teams making a push at the pinnacle of the mountain of the Big 12. And for now, however the way that the college football playoff format shakes out, whether it's 6 automatic bids next year or just 5, the Big 12 is going to get one of them. So it's ever important because the at-large bids are going to be going to the SEC and the Big 10. It's just, I can tell you right now how it's going to go. So winning the conference means everything. So West Virginia's got to make a splash to contend with Utah, Oklahoma State, all the teams that I just mentioned, to be that team. So what I'll say is this, is if Cincinnati and Baylor both are wins, and West Virginia wins the bowl game, I think Neal Brown's job's safe. There's only been 19 times in West Virginia football's history of over 130 years of football that West Virginia has won 9 games or more in a season. So how can you fire a head coach after he's won, again, one of 20 times then that your program's ever finished with 9 wins or more? So obviously there is some momentum with this young core, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You do have some playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, but I really like what I'm seeing recently out of Traylon Ray and Rodney Gallagher in that receiving core for the future. And, of course, you know how I feel about Nico Marchiol. And I love that this offensive line is growing and producing. And again, as I said just a little bit ago, I think Country Roads Trust and is in a better place to go out there and spend on transfer portal prospects this upcoming offseason, to not only just focus on retention. Oh, and I loved C.J. Donaldson too. Don't want to forget that. And Jaheim White's been stellar. But not only are you just going to have to focus on retention, I feel like, to take that step forward, but you got to go out there. You're going to have to go get some cornerbacks. I think you're going to have to go out there and maybe get a number 1 receiver if you can go out there and you can find somebody to the level of Devin Carter or better. We'll kind of step back and analyze that at the end of the season, but cornerback obviously is going to be huge for this upcoming portal cycle recruiting. But I think if West Virginia loses either of these 2 games, either to Cincinnati or Baylor, or they win both of these games, and this is where I'm going to put an or, and you're like, wow, Carson, you really are moving these goalposts, and get blown out to a team that you would say is moderately equal in talent level and they just get blown out in the bowl game, I'm all for West Virginia shooting their shot and going for Jimbo Fisher as the new head coach at West Virginia. So here, the reasons why I say that is I'm considering some of the parameters that I set back in this past summer when we were kind of talking about how Neal Brown was one of the hottest coaches on the hot seat for the upcoming season. So to already kind of put your wish list together, kind of come up with some ideas of guys to watch for, and we said a part of that criteria being that West Virginia fans would be happiest if it was a head coach from a Power 5 conference. So I know that Jimbo Fisher was fired for performance reasons, not anything off the field, like, say, a Mel Tucker at Michigan State, but for performance. But still, coming from the SEC, the heralded #1 conference in college football, what more can you ask for a guy coming from the SEC that has head coaching experience? Not an offensive coordinator, not a G5 level head coach, a P5 level head coach. Obviously, you have to consider the cost. And I'm wondering if there is, I think the money's there for Neal Brown's buyout, given what Texas and Oklahoma had to pay out to leave the conference a year early, plus Bob Huggins' salary that you saved by paying Josh Eilert as head coach of what you are for this basketball season. So I think they're supposed to be in the ballpark of $15 million. That's just from two sources, not considering what the donors, what the boosters would potentially pay for that buyout. And why I say this is I'm operating under the impression that Jimbo Fisher is affordable. Now, again, I think that Ren Baker is going to have to do this, quasi-interview, put some feelers out there to Jimbo Fisher's agent, and and Fisher and his agent and his family kind of in secrecy. As Lil Wayne once famously said back in the day, real G's move in silence like lasagna. So you can't let the head coach, you can't let any of the press know. Nobody's gonna have no wiretaps or whatever you can do. No secret server, or you have to have this on a secret email server or something crazy like that. But no one can know that while Neal Brown is still has the head coach at West Virginia University, that West Virginia is making contact with Jimbo Fisher. But Ren Baker's got to start this process. And because of how delicate of a situation that this came up with Fisher back when Rich Rodriguez left for Michigan in the late 2000s, if you read into kind of what happened there with Rich Rodriguez in Michigan back in the day, is it sounds like West Virginia took a shot with Jimbo Fisher, or Fisher expressed interest before he became the head coach at Florida State after Bobby Bowden retired, to try and get the job over Bill Stewart. But West Virginia shortchanged him, and we all recognize the financial the debt that West Virginia University, not the athletic department, but the university is in right now with its $45 million deficit. So West Virginia can't go out there, I feel like, and spend to what Fisher was previously making. I think paying Fisher what Neal Brown was making, considering the fact that Fisher is about to make a king's ransom to not coach Texas A&M. I mean, when you put the two salaries together, I'm not including what he's being paid in the first 30 days and then the first 3 months, but annually he's going to make $7 million up until 2031 from Texas A&M. So if you put that together with a $4 million salary that Neal Brown's getting paid by West Virginia, that's $11 million right there. There you are. You're one of the highest paid coaches, comprehensively in college football because of that. So, and the thing is, the other big tenet is answering the question, and this always comes up from fans, is, who wants to be here? Who could West Virginia honestly get that West Virginia, wants to be here? I think the reason why, and if you haven't seen the video, just search it out on Twitter or anywhere else you can find this old video of where he was asked, Jimbo Fisher was asked this question this past summer to the extent of, what are your thoughts on the West Virginia job? And he's, obviously, he's comfortable here, or his words, not directly, but home is home. And that, I think that was covertly, I love using that word twice now in one video, a pitch to West Virginia that he's interested. I don't know if he necessarily saw the writing on the wall this upcoming summer, or this past summer for this season, but I think he knew. I think once the A&M lost to Miami, lost to Alabama, lost to Tennessee, it's just like the expectations now at Texas A&M, because Texas is now joining the conference, have risen to the point where you got to be as good, if not better, than Alabama, LSU, now Texas. Like, it's just an unreasonable expectation that no coach, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there is a coach in college football who you can say can consistently beat those teams. I mean, you got, yes, the NIL that Texas A&M's deploying for recruiting, and then obviously the resources of the head coach. Like, there's all the reason in the world that you should be successful there at Texas A&M, being in the state of Texas as well with the local, homegrown base. But there's just so much competition. It's hard to flourish, and I'll come back to that point when I'll talk in a second. But, having ties to the state already, being from Clarksburg, never playing at West Virginia, never coaching at West Virginia, but from being from here, still having family here, I think there's obviously strong ties to Jimbo Fisher for this state and wanting to coach here. So, and you look at some of the other jobs that are going to be available, or already are, or going to be, not only the A&M job, Michigan very well, I believe that Jim Harbaugh is going to leave to go to the NFL with how many NFL jobs are opening, and especially if Michigan wins a national championship this year, there's nothing more for him to prove at the college level, getting Michigan back to a national championship level. So I think he's going to be looking elsewhere. UCLA's already opened up, Michigan State's there, so those are two Big Ten schools with money to spend, with the TV revenue that's coming in. Mississippi State's an SEC job, even though lower level. The list is only going to go on and on with availability. So we see this coaching carousel every year in college football. And, I mean, there are a few coaches, I think, that I've named on this program over the course of the last few months. Curt Cignetti at James Madison obviously has the West Virginia ties there, has James Madison nationally ranked, undefeated. Unfortunately, not having the chance at going to a conference championship game to then potentially get into the New Year's Six Bowls. But, I mean, hell of a season for Curt Cignetti and the Dukes. I said Dave Clawson over the summer, given the flexible or shaky ground that the ACC is as a conference, and Wake Forest's place in it, and has he accomplished everything that he could accomplish at Wake Forest? So could he be available potentially at the right price? And then Jonathan Smith out at Oregon State. I know now that he's coaching at his alma mater, has that program nationally ranked, taking them to new heights, has no East Coast ties. So, but given that Oregon State's going to be very soon, we'll see what happens with the college football playoff format, but relegated to a G5 conference, would he want to come to the Big 12? With that awesome offense. So those are just a few names. And when I tossed out that idea, everyone said about Jimbo Fisher this past summer, no, the buyout. Like, how is West Virginia ever going to do that? So, okay. So you get kind of giving you like the tenets of why I even bring this up. So then, let's dive deeper. So anytime that you talk about making a big-time decision like this, I love to do pros and cons lists. So let's do a direct head-to-head pros and cons list. And I've kind of given you at the forefront of this video about Neal Brown and his place and everything he's accomplished and where this program's currently at. Let's talk about Jimbo Fisher. So first and foremost, is he a winner? You'll look at the numbers, 128 wins to 48 losses overall as a head coach between Florida State and Texas A&M. 8-2 in bowl games. West Virginia has not had the greatest record in bowl games in history, so that's nice to see. 3 ACC championships at Florida State, and obviously the 2013 national championship, which West Virginia's never done. So a national championship winning head coach from your state, born in your state, who wants to be there, like, take the other context out, that's what's on the table out there. So, and the other thing is, I don't think you can have the benefits of youth that people always talk about with you got to have this grinder who's going to spend 25 out of the 24 waking hours of the day in the office grinding, recruiting, scouting, putting together custom game plans, but then, having experience too at the same time. Those are very few existing head coaches out there. So you look at Jimbo Fisher's age, 58 years old, 14 seasons as a head coach, 11 as an offensive coordinator. He's not old, he's not young. He's right there, kind of like in that sweet spot, maybe more so on like the 12th or 13th hole rather than the back 9 toward the end. Maybe he's on like that 13th hole and could go another 10 years coaching in college football, and this is like the right level, right fit for him. So, not young. Neal Brown still very much in head coaching circles, considered very, very young, in his early 40s. So, and Neal Brown's really learned some hard lessons, learning about how to not be as ultra conservative, learning not having so many like pre-snap, out of timeout penalties that just are clock management things that you got to learn. Again, being more aggressive on 4th down instead of punting on 4th and an inch against Pitt on the road with the game on the line. Like how much more aggressive he's being as a coach, how much he's just trying to do things his way, and I kind of like the edge that he's brought to this season rather than just being oh shucks, oh ho hum. We're gonna get. He's being more pissed off and aggressive, so I do like that. But again, so this is what you get all of that and more. I feel like with Jimbo Fisher. So then obviously this is the $1 million, let's just say the $12.5 million buyout question here. Is Jimbo Fisher washed up? That's what. I can hear arguments on both sides and can probably agree with both of them in each different ways. You look at the last 3 years, despite that 128-44 overall record, 8-4 in 2021, 5-7 in 2022. Texas A&M is 6-4 in 2023. So I come down to really 2 things that I think you can make an argument for Fisher. And again, I can hear the argument of, and please let me know in the comments, on Twitter, wherever, if you think he is washed up, tell me why. Give me some answers. Give me some feedback why you think he's not necessarily that good fit, because he's past his prime in coaching ability. I'm going to give you 2 reasons why I think he could be successful. Is if he surrounds himself with good assistants. And there are, I feel like, a lot of West Virginia boys out there, to use that term, who would want to come back and potentially coach with him. I mean, first and foremost, a name I've said a couple of times on different videos here and there. I look at the numbers at what the SMU offense is doing, and their record's, I think, 8-2. Garin Justice is, I think, their run game coordinator, offensive coordinator. Garin Justice, awesome guy to bring back into the program if the opportunity presented itself, I think. I mean, we obviously talk about the great one all the time, still an assistant with just an assistant offensive coach, not really a specific position, but Pat White at the Los Angeles Chargers, Ryan Stanchek at Tulsa now, obviously Tony Gibson at NC State being the defensive coordinator, Dakeil Shorts, wide receiver at Houston, and look what Sam Brown's developed into down there, and those guys who tore West Virginia up. Then another guy who was on the Texas A&M staff who had West Virginia ties, Markel Blackwell. He was Texas A&M's running backs coach this year, coached the running backs in 2018 with Dana Holgerson and so what was that, Martell Petway, Kennedy McCoy, Letty Brown. So And I'm just throwing out there some guys who either have ties to West Virginia or Texas Tech or Texas A&M who could come with Fisher there potentially. So how could he build out his staff? Who could he potentially retain from the current staff? I don't know who's his people that he'd want to get in there, but I think if he surrounded himself with good assistants, again, you do not have to be at college football the X's and O's, Bill Belichick, Kyle Shanahan kind of genius out there that you need to be at the NFL until you get to the college football playoff. When you're, going down to that Final Four, that's when the coaching prowess is. It's about recruiting. It's about not making mistakes. It's about, that's like, you can be Mike Gundy out there, who I think just knows how to win football games without having amazing talent every single year. Or if you can go out there and find the talent, I'm telling you, Ryan Day at Ohio State is not the greatest X's and O's head coach, but he just gets better talent than everybody else. James Franklin, Penn State, same dang difference. So, okay. I'm backtrack because I'm going to talk about recruiting in a second. And why I don't think Jimbo Fisher is necessarily washed up is because West Virginia in the Big 12, that's not the SEC, and that's especially not going to be the future SEC that's coming. Again, that this Big 12 conference has watered down a little bit. It's watered down it's going to be more watered down next year without Texas and Oklahoma, but adding in these new 4 teams. And again, those 4 Pac-12 teams, I think Utah is a nice addition, but it's not Oregon and it's not USC of an addition. So I know Utah's been right there, has all the accolades over the last 20 years. I talked about that in a previous video. So they're going to be right up there with with Oklahoma State at the top of this conference. But I'm talking about Arizona, Colorado, and Arizona State they're going to have a transition into the Big 12 that might not be as big of a jump as the 4 newcomers this year: Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, BYU. But it's going to be a bit of a culture change. It's going to feel different. But it's not the SEC at the end of the day. So Jimbo Fisher doesn't have this unrealistic expectation of winning. He's going to have to raise the talent level, as I've been saying for a long time with West Virginia recruiting. And that's what I was hoping what Neal Brown would be able to do with this program. But again, it'll be easier, quote-unquote, competition. So maybe if you deploy the same kinds of schemes, and Texas A&M wasn't that far away. Connor Wegman got injured this year, so that derailed some of their chances. And they had close losses. Tennessee was 7 points, Ole Miss, Alabama, they played tightly. Yeah, they lost by double digits to Miami on the road. But so that's just this year. And look what he did previously. They're not that far away from 2020 when they went 9-1, went to an Orange Bowl and won. So I know that NIL has changed a lot of things, and why did he not win with all that awesome talent that were freshmen and then sophomores this year? He's got to speak to that, or he's got to go prove that. So then the next point is, would Jimbo Fisher raise recruiting? I say yes, because how much worse could it get? I look at where Texas A&M is in the country, and I know we're talking about 2 completely different worlds of NIL there and that whole component, but Texas A&M 8th in the country with 16 4-stars. West Virginia has 1 for this cycle. They now have 19 commitments, 42nd in the country according to Rivals. If Fisher just brought two of those guys from Texas A&M to West Virginia, that doubled the amount of 4-star recruits that triple, I guess. But yeah, bringing over just 1 would match. But you get what I'm going here is just by getting 2 4-star recruits, it would be better than what West Virginia is currently doing. West Virginia's recruiting class this year is not very. It's a developmental class. Now I'm trusting in Drew Fabianich and and the rest of this new scouting department. He's in this new GM role. That this recruiting class hopefully has his paw prints on it, so that West Virginia is bringing in some guys that hopefully in a couple of years can start to contribute. Maybe a Brandon Raymond, who's their 4-star recruit at wide receiver, could rotate in, see the kind of contributions that we saw out of Traylon Ray and Rodney Gallagher so far this year, being that high caliber of a player. But a lot of these guys I'm looking at, like, I feel like are going to need a redshirt year and development, and like West Virginia just doesn't necessarily have that time. You need some guy. That's the problem is it takes time for the caliber of level of player that West Virginia is currently recruiting out of Neal Brown to get to a starting caliber level, develop athletically, talent-wise, learning the scheme, so on and so forth, that you just don't always have the time for in today's era of the transfer portal, where you can go and apparently pluck a player and plug them in there, which they're doing. And I think, again, also Neal Brown's learned a lot of lessons with that, of trying to build depth at the second string level for players that you bring into the transfer portal, usually with 2 years worth of eligibility remaining, so that the first year, you see this with Marcus Floyd, toward the end of their first year, they start to figure some things out, they can contribute, and then boom, they're a year 2 starter, per se. So it's almost like a JUCO kind of fit. Is that necessarily the way to go? Do you use the transfer portal? That's up for interpretation, and that's for someone else to decide. But I can just tell you how I've noticed Neal Brown using transfer players and how he's using high school recruits. Is they might, and I know it's all in the name of name, image, and likeness, because when you sign a player out of high school, you set the floor for what they're going to be on NIL. So everything that they do from here on out, they have to pay higher. So if you bring in a 4 or 5 star level player who's already this level as a college freshman, he's only going to go up and up and up as he does better in the it's almost like it really is. It's a roster management. That's what this is all about. It's like Major League Baseball, the payroll of what you're paying the Yankees and what you're paying the Pirates. And West Virginia, I don't think is down here, but I think they're closer to down here than they are to up here. So that's the world that we live in nowadays with NIL. But what I say is this, is Fisher's now been around the block with Texas A&M's collective. I think he'll get Country Roads trust, even moving faster. Might, with this coaching change, bring in more donor support. Again, if you win, and they have a roster, I feel like, that can go toe-to-toe at home next year with Penn State. You beat Penn State in your first game. Whoa. That's huge. Huge. So, last point I'll say is, would Jimbo Fisher be able to keep the roster together? That's where I err on the side of no, not necessarily. I think one of the main things that's keeping C.J. Donaldson in Morgantown is the loyalty that West Virginia's coaching staff showed him in the recruitment process, giving him his first Power 5 offer, keeping him there. We talked about how Rodney Gallagher was a near flip to Penn State when it seemed like West Virginia was going to fire Neal Brown at the end of the season last year. I think you're seeing this with more football programs, both in football and basketball, but there's such a loyalty to the coaching staff that recruiting you because of the relational aspect of knowing you, all the way from when you're as early as 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and then through the whole recruiting class, and then you're 4 years in college. So sometimes it's a, 6, 7 year, 8-year relationship that you have between your head coach and your player and the family and so on and so forth. So I think there is some loyalty, and I respect that actually out of these players, is that they're very loyal to Neal Brown, and they haven't given up on him. They haven't mutinied him. And I think that's unfortunately what some of Texas A&M's guys did last year, is they rolled over in some contests and didn't play to the best of their ability. So I don't want that to happen to West Virginia's team. I want to see this young core stay together and build for 2024 and beyond, because I'm really impressed with what they've done this year. I just keep going back to, and what I said kind of at the forefront of this video is West Virginia necessarily stuck in neutral? I don't think there's much evidence to prove after 5 years and he's not going to, unfortunately, Neal Brown, unless West Virginia gets to a nice, respectable bowl game with an opponent that has an 8-4 record or better as well, and goes out there and beats them particularly soundly, that you're giving enough cause with how many ranked opponents West Virginia's beaten in these last few years, and how many wins in general that you've come up victorious. Is, can you upgrade? And if there's a time to do it, a right fit coach at the right time to do it, I think it could be this year. Because I don't know if Jimbo Fisher takes a year off, or he wants to jump right back into coaching, or he wants to do like Dan Mullen and kind of like sit out on the sidelines, talk on television, and wait for his best right fit, kind of like Mullen's doing right now. He's making $75 million over the next 7 years, so he doesn't necessarily have to from a financial standpoint, I guess. But I just think he's still at that kind of like sweet spot, ripe age to stick into coaching. He wants to be in Morgantown. I think he reveres it. I think that he has very, fond thoughts already and respect for West Virginia, and following them from afar while through his coaching journey, 15 years ago, I think is probably far enough into the distance that the negotiations necessarily just wasn't the right time, right fit, but now maybe it is. And this might be just like the perfect level with Fisher's coaching acumen to try some new things, to get some new people involved. I don't know how hard-headed and how stubborn he is. I'm pretty sure it's up there that like he wants to do things his way or the highway. So we might have a whole Dana Holgorsen situation over on ourselves again. But I think like not from the I'm just talking about from the on-field coaching aspect, not necessarily what he would do beyond the office and treating alumni and getting them involved and stuff like that. That was obviously a contentious point with Dana Holgorsen. So all this to say is I don't want to see Neal Brown fired by any means, any stretch of the imagination. I want to see this program succeed. And if he's the head coach of this program, then I want to see him succeed as well. So if West Virginia goes out, and I also don't think like two close wins, like within 7 points of both Cincinnati and Baylor, is going to be anything like, great to write home about for this program. Like, you got to win convincingly in both these games, and then you got to go out there and you got to win the bowl game. So that's what I mean to say. That's why I want to do this video now, before the Cincinnati game, because if West Virginia loses this game against Cincinnati on Saturday, I think it could get very ugly very fast. And I want to hold on to the wheel for when that time happens, because it could go haywire. We could be off the road and swerving and doing donuts. So thanks for tuning into this broadcast. I want to know how you feel. If you like this video or some of the other videos on my channel, please subscribe to my channel, like this video so other Mountaineers fans can see it across YouTube and across social media. And I'll be back tomorrow to preview Bearcats Mountaineers from Milan Puskar Stadium on Senior Day, also an honoring legendary head coach Don Nehlen game. So thanks for tuning in. Let's go.